I have seen this pattern play out a good few times before, but I've never seen this happen quite so fast. So I would like to thank Silicon Valley for basically expediting the process and creating a very visible way of showing exactly what they do and what I have been afraid of and saying for a few months now would be the case. Now, for those of you curious exactly what I'm talking about in reference to the title, there has been this very noticeable and repeatable pattern, though usually a good deal slower, so you could be excused for missing it. This is something that Silicon Valley seems to be doing right now in order to stop competition and to make sure that nothing endangers their own little bubble. I've said before that Silicon Valley just that little encapsulated area has more power than a lot of countries right now. And it absolutely does. Why the fuck it isn't being regulated or laws aren't being passed to prevent them from doing this, I don't know. But especially after seeing this, they need to. And it needs to happen fast. Let me give you the chain of events here. And this all happened in the last week. It was somewhere around last Friday or Saturday. Carl Benjamin, otherwise known as Sargon of Akkad, was banned from Patreon. Now, he was rather curious about that because he didn't actually break any of Patreon's terms of service or terms of use, or however they specifically word their user agreement. And Patreon got back to him and told him it was because he appeared on someone else's podcast and said a no-no. Now, if you look at Patreon's terms of use, that's not a thing that's covered in there that they can ban you over. Patreon bans you for things you do on Patreon. That includes anything that you post to Patreon or one of your Patreon things. Like if you're a patron for making videos and then you post one of the video links in your Patreon, that counts. Perfectly fine. That's understandable. What he did was something not only not on Patreon, it wasn't even on his own fucking channel. But they banned him, and they specifically said it was because of this. And because he said a naughty naughty, and they need him to prove that he didn't say this in a bad way or a derogatory way. So he needs to prove intent for innocence. Our legal system just screamed in pain. So he's been banned, and he went over to another Patreon-like service. It's called Subscribestar. In many ways, it's Patreon Lite. It was made early this year, I believe in February, just as a Patreon substitute if people wanted to use it, and it saw basically no traffic because that's how a lot of these small sites start out. Their first year or two, they're basically dead in the water. So Sargon gets on there, immediately gets a lot of people to follow him. People jump ship off of Patreon because they look at what Patreon did. They find it very bad from a policy standpoint that Patreon is looking at all social media aspects of a person, regardless of whether it's part of the Patreon or not. They don't like that invasion of privacy. They move to a different thing, including a lot of other people got their funds cut because of this. Because these people didn't just leave to fund Sargon's thing, but stayed on there for everybody else that they were also funding. No, they took their whole money and left. We're talking probably 6 figures monthly have now left Patreon because of this. That's a big hit. I don't care how large a company you are. And Patreon, in the grand scheme, isn't that large. It's large, don't get me wrong. They deal with millions of dollars a month. This is still going to hurt. So Sargon and now a good number of other people moved to Patreon, moved from Patreon to Subscribestar. So many people moved that were making $1,000+ a month that Patreon actually started sending out unsolicited notices saying, "Oh, don't worry, we aren't going to ban you. No. This was only for this one thing. We looked at this one differently, but you're fine. You're fine. Don't worry. No. You're okay." Which should be disturbing in and of itself, that Patreon fully admits that they were looking at a different person differently rather than applying their rules the same across the board. But I digress. That's another video that a lot of other people have talked about. Mine goes down this rabbit hole. So Subscribestar is now making, for all of the people on it, a lot of money. Not quite that 100,000 that I mentioned, but probably bordering it at this point. I would not be shocked at all. So because this is a new alternative to what is deemed as the progressively correct company, the media has now gone in full swing, find any way to smear this company that they can mode. And the biggest thing that they got on Subscribestar is that the creator is Russian. Ooh, spooky. I don't like communism. I don't think every Russian is a communist. Yet the correct thought media seems to look at any Russian as if they were Putin himself. So tell me, politically correct media, which one of us is the racist exactly? Anywho, they smear this site so fast and in such rapid succession that PayPal bans them from using their service. Well, now, let me be fair here. They didn't officially ban Subscribestar from using PayPal. They just said, "We would appreciate if you never used us. Thanks." That's a ban, you idiots. You can try and weasel word your way out of that as much as you like. That is a fucking ban. Come on now. In the time span of a week from Sargon's ban to PayPal no longer funding Subscribestar, 1 week. Just 1 fucking week. What normally takes 2-3 months, compressed and expedited to a degree I didn't think possible at this point. But this is what happens. Silicon Valley has encapsulated itself in a very tight, closely knit bubble. We know this because accidentally Jack Conte, the CEO of Patreon, admitted to it. He, in an interview about a year or two ago, I think it was less than a year because this happened when another person got banned from Patreon, he gave an interview where he said that a lot of the Silicon Valley CEOs, they get together, they talk amongst themselves, they help each other out, they do all sorts of things like that. I'm paraphrasing. You can find that video. I believe that this was in the interview that he was responding to about the ban of Lauren Southern from Patreon. I could be wrong on that. So all of the big names in Silicon Valley get together, I'm absolutely certain they collude. You cannot tell me that so many different places that are completely opposite businesses, if not in direct competition with themselves, all banned someone. Not Sargon. They banned Alex Jones all at once as a coincidence. You cannot make me believe that's a coincidence. That was absolutely all of these companies working together and doing it at the same fucking time. It's just a matter of who's going to pull the trigger first. All these companies work together. They all seem to share the same idea or ideology for what they want of the world. And if you, as a user or a moneymaker or whatever for their service, you don't fit into that, yo ass is grass. And these last couple weeks, we have seen so many of these services banning people for not even breaking the rules of the site. Their sole crime is they do not fit into this perfect mold that the site wants. That's it. And this is what I find amusing. Every time these people are told, oh, well, it's, by the way, these people are told by people who absolutely hate capitalism, oh, well, it's a free market. Just go out and create your own site then. So they do. They either create their own site or they get on a site that was created as an alternative for this. And then when they do that, the media smears these companies to no end, calling them Nazis, alt-right, racists, sexists, etc. And then they work with the banks and or PayPal to get funding cut so that they can't do any kind of funding, thus destroying the site. This way ensuring that these companies are the sole providers of this particular service. We don't want a new Patreon, so we're going to get PayPal to cut being able to get paid through this site. We don't want a new YouTube, so we are going to make it so that the banks shut down BitChute, etc., etc., etc. There have been so many of these examples, but this one is the fastest I've seen it happen. Silicon Valley needs to be reined in. They are far too fucking powerful. They have too much influence. What they are doing is absolutely a monopoly. It's not only a monopoly, it's fucking criminal organization that they've got going. But no one seems to want to do anything about it. I don't get why our government, the United States government, is so apprehensive about stopping this. Because it absolutely needs to be. I am against monopolies. I am against huge mega corporations stomping out any kind of new alternative business that could exist. I hate the cable companies for this exact reason. But here it's perfectly acceptable because, well, these companies have the right opinions. So we're fine with that because we in the left have no standards. This is why I'm a centrist. I hold everyone to the same standard, regardless of if it's an organization that I feel agrees with me or not. We really need some kind of, I hate to say this because I know how heavy-handed the government is. We really need the government to come in and fight against all of the bannings, the censorships, the you're gone for wrong opinion that happens on these internet sites. We need the government to come in and stop Silicon Valley from becoming its own fucking country. This needs to happen now, because it seems like at the tail end of this year in particular, Silicon Valley has gotten a lot more ballsy. And considering that this worked in the time span of just a week, I'm actually really scared to think what they will do from now on, because they've been getting worse and better at it. I do not want to live in a world where I am ruled by Silicon Valley. Thank you. This has been Math Machine saying, look out for alternatives and hope they stick. And don't believe everything you hear about these alternatives from our completely unbiased media. Peace out.